I didn't expect anything to happen that night. That's probably the part that still messes with my head the most. How normal it all started. It was just me and Lorenzo, like always. We'd known each other for a couple years at that point. Met through mutual friends, ended up in the same gym, same routines, same dumb inside jokes. He was one of those guys who just slid into your life without effort. Loud when he wanted to be, cocky in that harmless way, always pushing things just a little too far, but never enough to make it weird. At least, that's what I thought. That evening, we were at his place. Nothing special. Just a random Friday, a couple beers in, some music playing low in the background. We'd both just finished a late workout, still riding that restless energy that doesn't really go away unless you burn it out or distract yourself. Lorenzo was pacing around the living room, shirtless, towel slung over his shoulder, still slightly damp from his shower. "You're getting soft, Mark," he said, smirking at me. I scoffed from the couch. "I literally outlifted you today." "Yeah? In your dreams?" He grabbed one of the couch cushions and threw it straight at my face. I caught it barely. "You want to test that?" he added, raising an eyebrow. I should have just laughed it off. That would have been the normal move. But something about the way he said it, half joking, half challenging, hit that competitive nerve in me. "Oh, you mean like right now?" I shot back. He grinned. "Yeah. Right now." There was this split second where we just looked at each other. That familiar tension, not serious, just playful, but charged enough to push things forward. "All right," I said, standing up. "But don't cry when you lose. Please," he laughed. "I'm about to humble you." And that's how it started. No big moment. No dramatic shift. Just two guys messing around. We cleared a bit of space in the living room, kicking aside a chair, moving the coffee table just enough so we wouldn't slam into it. The music kept playing, something low and bass heavy, like background noise to whatever stupid thing we were about to do. "Rules?" I asked. "No rules," Lorenzo said instantly. "Just don't be a baby." "Cool. Same to you." And then he lunged first. I barely had time to react before his hands were on me, grabbing at my shoulders, trying to throw me off balance. I laughed, shoving him back, our feet sliding slightly against the hardwood floor. It was rough, but still light. Playful. At first. We circled each other for a second, both grinning, both pretending like this was nothing. Then I went in, hooking an arm around his side, trying to pull him down. "Too slow," he muttered, twisting out of it. His hand caught my wrist, then my waist, and suddenly we were a lot closer than we had been a second ago. Still joking. Still laughing. But there was something else creeping in. I don't know exactly when it shifted. Maybe it was the way he didn't let go right away. Or how I didn't either. We stumbled, both of us losing balance for a second before crashing lightly against the wall. The impact knocked a breath out of me, but I was still smiling. "Got you," he said, voice lower now. "Not really," I shot back, pushing off the wall. But he held on. That's when I noticed it. His grip wasn't just playful anymore. It was firmer. More intentional. And I felt it, this weird, sudden awareness of everything. His body pressed close, the heat of his skin, the way his breath hit just a little heavier than before. For a second, either of us moved. We were still in position, half wrestling, half stuck. "You gonna tap out?" he asked. But it didn't sound like a joke anymore. I shook my head slightly. "You wish." I tried to twist out again, but he adjusted fast, pulling me down with him this time. We hit the floor, not hard, but enough to knock the air between us. Now I was underneath him. And yeah, this is where it stopped feeling like a joke. Because suddenly, everything slowed down. His knees pinned my sides just enough to keep me in place, his hands still holding my wrists, but not tight enough to hurt. Just enough to control. I looked up at him, expecting that same stupid grin. But it wasn't there. Not fully. There was something else in his expression. Something focused. Something different. Still think you're winning? He said quietly. My heart was beating faster now, and not just from the wrestling. Yeah, I replied, though it came out a little less confident than I wanted. He huffed a small laugh, but didn't move. Didn't let go. And I didn't push him off. That's the part one keep going back to. Because I could have ended it right there. Made a joke, shoved him away, stood up, reset everything back to normal. But I didn't. Instead, I just stayed there, looking up at him, feeling the weight of him on me, the heat, the closeness. And he noticed. I know he did. Because his grip shifted slightly, not loosening, not tightening, just changing. Like he was testing something. Like he was waiting. You're not even trying anymore, he said. I swallowed, barely. Maybe I don't need to. There was a pause. A real one this time. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just messing around anymore. This was something else. Something we hadn't said out loud yet, but we were both starting to feel it. And neither of us was stopping. I wish I could say one of us snapped out of it right then. Made a joke, rolled off, grabbed another beer like nothing happened. But that's not what happened. Instead, Lorenzo stayed exactly where he was. And I didn't move. It wasn't frozen, not really. It felt deliberate. Like we'd both quietly agreed to see how far this would go without actually saying it. His hands were still around my wrists, but looser now. Not pinning me down, just resting there. Like he didn't need to hold me anymore. Like I wasn't going anywhere. You always get quiet when you're losing? He asked. I let out a short breath, trying to keep it light. You wish I was losing? He tilted his head slightly, studying me in a way I hadn't seen before. Not joking. Not teasing. Just looking. And it made my chest tighten in a way I didn't expect. Then do something, he said. That should have been my cue. Instead, I shifted under him, not to push him off, but just enough to adjust. And the second I did, I felt it. The friction, the contact, the way our bodies were suddenly a little too aligned. It hit both of us. I saw it in his face. That flicker. That split second where everything clicked. And still, neither of us moved away. Mark, he started, but didn't finish. His voice was different now. Lower. Uncertain for once. I swallowed, my throat dry. Yeah? Another pause. Then, instead of answering, he shifted his weight slightly. Closer. Not enough to be obvious. But enough that there was no way to ignore it anymore. My heart started pounding harder, and I could feel it, how aware I was of everything. His breath, the heat of his skin, the way his grip on my wrists had turned into something almost absent, like he'd forgotten he was even holding them. You're not stopping me, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. And that made it worse. I let out a shaky breath, forcing a small smirk. You're not doing anything I need to stop. That was a mistake. Because something in his expression changed again. Not playful. Not uncertain. Just decided. Yeah? He said softly. Then he let go of my wrists. For a second, I thought that was it. That he was backing off, giving me space to reset everything. But instead, his hands moved, slow, deliberate, settling against my sides. And this time, when he leaned in slightly, there was nothing accidental about it. Every nerve in my body lit up. Still just joking? He asked. I should have said yes. I should have laughed. Instead, I just looked at him. And didn't answer. That silence said more than anything else could have. Because the second it stretched too long, he exhaled sharply through his nose, like he'd been holding something back. Okay, he muttered. He shifted again. Closer. This time there was no pretending. No joking. No way to brush it off as just two guys messing around. My hands moved before I even thought about it, gripping lightly at his sides, not pushing him away, just holding on. That stopped him. Not completely. But enough. We were both breathing heavier now, the kind that had nothing to do with wrestling anymore. Tell me to stop, he said. And there it was. The out. Clear. Simple. Easy. All I had to do was say it. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because the truth was, I didn't want him to. And I think he saw that. Because the second that realization settled between us, something shifted again. The hesitation that had been holding him back, it cracked. Not completely. But enough. His hand tightened slightly at my side, his thumb brushing just a fraction against my skin, like he was testing the reaction. I inhaled sharply. Didn't pull away. Didn't stop him. And that was all the confirmation he needed. All right, he said quietly. Then he leaned in just a little more. Not all the way. Not crossing that final line. But close enough that I could feel his breath against my neck now, warm and uneven. And my grip on him tightened without me even realizing it. This wasn't a joke anymore. Not even close. But the crazy part? Neither of us seemed willing to be the one to break it. We just stayed there, right on the edge of something we both knew we couldn't undo once it happened. And for the first time that night, I realized I wasn't scared of that. Not even a little. Neither of us moved. That was the strangest part. It wasn't like in movies where everything suddenly escalates, or someone makes a bold move. It was quieter than that. He was still hovering close, his breath warm against my neck, and I could feel how tense he was, like he was holding himself back just as much as I was. "You're really not gonna say anything?" he murmured. His voice had lost that teasing edge completely. It sounded careful. I exhaled slowly, staring up at the ceiling for a second before looking back at him. "I don't know what you want me to say." That was the truth. Because whatever this was, it didn't fit into anything I understood about us. About him. Lorenzo let out a quiet laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Yeah, same." For a moment, it almost broke the tension. Almost. But then his hand shifted again, resting a little more firmly at my side, and that awareness came rushing back instantly. My body reacted before my brain could catch up, subtle, but enough that he noticed. His eyes flicked down, then back up to mine. "Okay," he said quietly, more to himself than to me. And then he did something that surprised me more than anything else that night. He leaned back. Not far. Just enough to put a little space between us. The air felt different immediately, cooler, easier to breathe, but the tension didn't disappear. If anything, it got sharper now that we weren't hiding inside the contact. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. "We should probably stop." Probably. Not we should stop. Not this is a bad idea. Just, probably. I pushed myself up onto my elbows, and for the first time since this started, we weren't tangled up anymore. Just sitting there, facing each other on the floor like nothing had happened, except everything had. "Yeah," I said. But neither of us actually moved to get up. A few seconds passed. Then a few more. "You felt that too, right?" he asked suddenly. I frowned slightly. "Felt what?" He gave me a look. Not annoyed. Just pointed. "Don't do that," he said. "Don't act like you don't know." I hesitated. Because I did know. I just didn't know what to do with it. "Yeah," I admitted finally. "I felt it." The words hung there between us, heavier than they should have been. Lorenzo nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer but still needed to hear it out loud. "Okay. Good. So I'm not just losing my mind." I let out a small breath, rubbing the back of my neck. "I don't think you are." Another pause. This one felt different. Less charged, but more real. He shifted back slightly, sitting properly now, forearms resting on his knees. "That got weird." I almost laughed at that. "Yeah. Weird is one way to put it. But not bad weird," he added quickly. That made me look at him. He wasn't joking anymore. Not deflecting. Just being honest in a way I wasn't used to seeing from him. "Not bad," I agreed, quieter. Something in his shoulders relaxed at that. "Okay," he said again, like he was trying to ground himself. So what the hell do we do with that? I didn't have an answer. Because this wasn't just some random moment. It wasn't something we could easily pretend didn't happen. Not after how close we'd gotten. Not after the way either of us had stopped it. I don't know, I admitted. He nodded slowly, staring at the floor for a second before glancing back at me. We can just not make it a thing, he suggested. Say it was stupid. Heat of the moment. Whatever. I considered that. It would have been the easiest option. Go back to normal. Keep things simple. Pretend this didn't crack something open between us. But the second I thought about it, I knew it wouldn't work. Because things already felt different. Do you actually want that? I asked. Lorenzo didn't answer right away. He just looked at me. Really looked this time. And after a few seconds, he shook his head slightly. No, he said. And just like that, we were right back on the edge again. Only this time, it wasn't an accident. No. The word landed heavier than anything else that night. Lorenzo didn't look away after he said it. If anything, his gaze locked in harder, like he was finally done dodging whatever this was. And I felt it again, that same pull from before. Not physical this time, not just that. Something deeper. Like the ground between us had shifted and neither of us knew where we were standing anymore. Okay, I said slowly. It wasn't really an answer. Just acknowledgement. He nodded once, like that was enough for now. Then he leaned back slightly, bracing himself with his hands behind him, eyes still on me. So we're not pretending it didn't happen, he said. No, I replied. And we're not just ignoring it. I shook my head. Doesn't seem like we can. A small, almost relieved exhale left him. Yeah. Didn't think so. For a second, either of us spoke. The music in the background had long since blended into silence, something slow and distant, barely noticeable compared to how loud everything else felt. Then he laughed quietly, running a hand over his face. This is insane. Yeah, I agreed. A little. A little? He shot back, a faint grin tugging at his mouth. We went from arguing about reps at the gym to whatever that was. I couldn't help it. I let out a short laugh too. When you say it like that, yeah? Sounds worse. He dropped his hand, looking back at me, more serious again. But you felt it. It wasn't a question anymore. Still, I nodded. Yeah. Another pause. Not awkward. Just loaded. He shifted again, sitting up straighter now, closer than before, but not touching. Not yet. I've never. He started, then stopped, shaking his head slightly. I don't even know how to explain it. You don't have to, I said. Because I got it. Even if I couldn't explain it either. He studied me for a second, like he was trying to figure out how I was so calm about this. Or maybe just whether I was faking it. You're taking this way better than I am, he said. I'm not, I replied honestly. I just haven't figured out what freaking out would solve. That earned a quiet huff of amusement from him. Fair, he said. But his legs shifted slightly, closer to mine. Not enough to touch. Just enough that the space between us felt intentional again. Like before. Like we were both aware of it. You ever think about this? He asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. About this? I gestured vaguely between us. Yeah. Me and you. Like that. I hesitated. Because the honest answer wasn't simple. Not like this, I said finally. Not real. He nodded slowly, like that made sense. Same, he admitted. I mean, he paused, exhaling. I've noticed stuff, I guess. But I never went there. Yeah. Another silence. Then, almost without thinking, I shifted closer too. It wasn't a big movement. Barely noticeable. But this time, our knees brushed. And neither of us pulled away. That small contact felt louder than anything else. Lorenzo glanced down for a split second, then back up at me. "You're doing that on purpose now," he said quietly. "So are you," I replied. A corner of his mouth lifted. "Yeah," he admitted. And there it was again. That edge. Only now, it wasn't accidental. It wasn't confusing in the same way. We both knew exactly what we were doing. The difference was, we still hadn't decided if we were going to stop. Or not. Lorenzo's expression shifted slightly, something more serious settling in again. "If we don't stop this now." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I held his gaze. "Then we don't." Another pause. Longer this time. He searched my face like he was looking for hesitation. Doubt. Anything that would make the decision easier for him. But I didn't give him that. Because I didn't feel it. And I think that's what made up his mind. His hand moved first. Not fast. Not sudden. Just steady. He reached out, fingers brushing lightly against my arm, like he was giving me one last chance to pull away. I didn't. So his hand settled there. Warm. Certain. And when I didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't stop him, his grip tightened just slightly. Not controlling. Just real. I looked down at where his hand rested, then back up at him. Neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. Because whatever this was, we'd already crossed the line where it could still be a joke. And this time, we weren't going back. There's a moment, right before something changes for real, where everything feels sharper. That's where we were. His hand was still on my arm, steady, warm, like he'd made a decision and wasn't backing out of it. And I could feel my own pulse under his fingers, way faster than it should have been. But I didn't move. Didn't pull away. And neither did he. "Still good?" he asked quietly. It wasn't hesitation this time. It was respect. Like he needed to hear it once more, even after everything. "Yeah," I said. My voice came out lower than I expected. That was enough. His grip shifted slightly, not tighter, just more certain, and then he let out a slow breath, like he'd been holding it in for the past 5 minutes. "Okay," he murmured. And then, nothing dramatic happened. No sudden move. No rush. If anything, everything slowed down even more. He stayed close, his hand still resting on me, his eyes searching mine like he was trying to read every reaction before it even happened. It should have felt awkward. It didn't. It felt intentional. Like we were both aware that whatever came next mattered. "You realize this changes things," he said after a moment. I gave a small nod. "Yeah. And you're fine with that?" I held his gaze. "Are you?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, his thumb moved slightly against my arm, absent, almost unconscious, but it sent a quiet jolt through me anyway. "Yeah," he said finally. "I think I am." That "I think" hung there, honest in a way that made it more real, not less. Because I felt the same. Neither of us had this figured out. We were just choosing not to stop. "All right," I said. And something in his expression softened at that. Not uncertainty, just relief. Like we'd both been waiting for the other one to back out, and now that neither of us had, we could finally stop pretending this was still a question. He shifted closer again. This time, there was no hesitation in it. Our knees pressed together fully now, his hand sliding slightly down my arm, not in a rush, not pushing anything further than it needed to go. Just closing the distance that had been driving both of us crazy. I let out a quiet breath, leaning in just a fraction too. It felt natural. That was the part that surprised me the most. Not forced. Not confusing in the same chaotic way as before. Just right. "You're really calm," he said. "I'm not," I admitted. "I just don't want to overthink it." He huffed a small laugh. "Too late for that." "Yeah," I said, a faint smile pulling at my mouth. "Probably." Another pause. But this one felt different again. Less like waiting. more like, settling. His hand finally slipped away from my arm, but only so he could shift closer properly, sitting right in front of me now. No space left between us. And still, he didn't rush anything. You sure? He asked one last time. I nodded. Yeah. That was it. No big speech. No perfect moment. Just that. And somehow, that made everything feel even more real. Because this time, when we moved closer, it wasn't an accident. It wasn't a joke. It was a choice. And we both knew it. There wasn't a clear line where it happened. No dramatic shift. Just closeness turning into something we couldn't ignore anymore. We were sitting right in front of each other now, knees pressed together, barely any space left between us. And for the first time that night, neither of us was pretending this was still a joke. Lorenzo looked at me like he was trying to memorize something. Or maybe understand it. I didn't expect this, he said quietly. Me either. A faint smile crossed his face, but it didn't last long. You good though? Like, for real? I nodded. Yeah. You? He let out a slow breath. Yeah. But his eyes stayed on mine, like he was still checking. Still making sure. And then, finally, he leaned in just a little closer. Not fast. Not overwhelming. Just enough that everything else faded into the background. I could feel the shift again, not physical this time, not just that, but something internal. Like whatever barrier had been there before was just gone. We stayed like that for a second. 2. Neither of us rushing it. And then it happened. Simple. Quiet. Real. The kind of moment that doesn't need anything extra to make it meaningful. And for a second, everything else disappeared. No overthinking. No labels. Just that. When we pulled back, it wasn't sudden. Just enough to look at each other again. Lorenzo let out a breath, almost like a laugh, but softer. Okay, yeah? That definitely just happened. I couldn't help the small smile that came with it. Yeah. He ran a hand through his hair again, shaking his head slightly like he was trying to process it in real time. You all right? I asked. Yeah, he said quickly. Then slower, more honestly. Yeah. I think so. There was a pause. Then he added, You? I nodded. I'm good. And I meant it. Even if I didn't fully understand it yet. He leaned back slightly, not far, just enough to breathe a little easier. But he didn't move away completely. His leg was still against mine, that connection still there, intentional now. We're not gonna be able to just go back to normal after this, he said. No, I agreed. And I don't even know what this is yet. Me either. Another quiet moment. But this one didn't feel tense anymore. It felt grounded. Like whatever had been building all night had finally settled into something real. Lorenzo glanced at me again, something softer in his expression now. Less guarded. But I don't regret it, he said. I held his gaze. Me either. And that was the part that mattered. Not what we called it. Not what it meant yet. Just that neither of us wanted to undo it. He nodded slightly, like that answer meant more than anything else I could have said. All right, he murmured. Then, after a second, a faint grin came back. Still think you could take me in a rematch, though? I let out a short laugh, the tension finally breaking in a way that felt normal again, but different too. Not a chance. Yeah? We'll see. And just like that, some of the old dynamics slipped back in. But not all of it. Because now there was something else there too. Something quieter. Something we hadn't figured out yet. But for the first time that night, we weren't trying to ignore it anymore. For a while, we didn't move. Not because we were stuck, but because neither of us seemed in a hurry anymore. The energy had shifted. It wasn't that chaotic, confusing tension from before. It felt steadier now. Quieter. Like whatever line we'd crossed, we were standing on the other side of it, just taking it in. Lorenzo leaned back on his hands again, glancing up at the ceiling. Okay, he said under his breath, like he was still processing. So that's real. I let out a small breath, nodding. Yeah. Another pause. Then he looked back at me, more focused this time. You're not gonna wake up tomorrow and act like this was a mistake. Right. There was no accusation in it. Just concern. And that caught me off guard a little. No, I said. I'm not. He held my gaze for a second longer, like he needed to be sure. Then he nodded slowly. Good. Something about the way he said it, quiet but firm, made it clear that mattered to him more than he was letting on. What about you? I asked. He shrugged lightly, but there was nothing careless about it. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out what this even means for me. He paused, then added, but I'm not pretending it didn't happen either. That was enough. We didn't need everything figured out right now. Just that. He shifted closer again, not hesitating this time. Our shoulders brushed, then settled side by side like it was the most natural thing in the world. And weirdly, it kind of was. You know what's messing with me? He said. What? He huffed a quiet laugh. How normal this feels. I glanced at him. Yeah. Like, it should feel way more complicated or something. It probably will, I said. Just not right this second. He smirked slightly. Give it time, huh? Yeah. Another silence. But this one wasn't heavy. It was comfortable. Lorenzo rested his forearms on his knees, leaning forward a bit. So what now? I thought about it. About everything that had just happened. About how easily we could mess this up if we rushed it, or ignored it. I think we just don't force anything. I said. See where it goes. He nodded slowly, like that made sense. Yeah, he said. I can do that. Then, after a second, he added, but I'm not going back to pretending you're just some guy I wrestle and hit the gym with. I let out a small laugh. Would be kinda hard now. Exactly. He bumped his shoulder lightly into mine, a familiar gesture, but it felt different now. More intentional. Still gonna beat you next time, though, he added. I rolled my eyes. Keep telling yourself that. He grinned, and for a second, it felt like everything had snapped back into place. But it hadn't. Not completely. Because under all of that, under the jokes, the ease, there was something new now. Something neither of us was ignoring anymore. After a while, he stood up, stretching slightly. You staying over? The question felt casual. But it wasn't. I looked up at him, catching that same flicker in his expression, the one that said this wasn't just about crashing on the couch. Yeah, I said. He nodded once, like he'd expected that. All right, he replied. Couch or you taking the bed? I raised an eyebrow. You offering? He smirked, but there was something more behind it now. I mean, I don't really feel like pretending we need separate space tonight. That pause hit again. Not as intense as before. But still real. I stood up slowly, stepping closer. Yeah, I said. Me neither. For a second, we just stood there. Close. Not rushing. Not backing off. Just there. And as simple as that moment was, it felt like the start of something neither of us had planned. But neither of us wanted to walk away from either. That night didn't feel rushed. That's the only way I can explain it. There was no urgency, no pressure to figure everything out before morning. Just a quiet understanding between us that whatever this was, it didn't have to be defined right away. We ended up in his room without really talking about it. At first, it felt almost too normal. Like any other time I'd been over, except now every small thing carried weight. The way he tossed me a spare t-shirt. The way our hands brushed for a second longer than necessary. Neither of us pointed it out. We didn't need to. You can take the bed, he said like earlier. Lorenzo. I cut in. He stopped. Looked at me. And there it was again, That moment where everything could go one way or the other. You don't have to do that, I said. A pause. Then a small nod. Yeah, he replied quietly. Okay. No jokes this time. No deflection. We just got into bed like it wasn't the most loaded thing we'd ever done. At first, there was space between us. Not much, but enough to pretend we were easing into it. That lasted maybe 30 seconds. Then he shifted slightly, turning onto his side, facing me. You awake? He asked, even though it was obvious. I let out a quiet breath. Yeah. Another pause. Then, softer. You good? I nodded, even though he could barely see it in the dim light. Yeah. You? Yeah. But neither of us sounded completely convinced. Not because it felt wrong. Just knew. He moved a little closer. Slow. Careful. Like earlier, giving me time to stop it if I wanted to. I didn't. So the space between us disappeared. And just like that, it felt natural again. Not overwhelming. Not confusing in the same chaotic way as before. Just right. We stayed like that for a while, not saying much. Just existing in that quiet, shared space, both of us clearly thinking, but not overthinking. After a few minutes, he let out a small breath. This is gonna mess with my head tomorrow, he admitted. I huffed a quiet laugh. Yeah. Same. But, he added, hesitating slightly, I'm not mad about it. I turned my head a little more toward him. Me either. That seemed to settle something in him. His arm shifted slightly, resting more comfortably between us, not pulling me in, not holding back either. Just there. Guess we'll figure it out, he said. Yeah. Another pause. Then, quieter, almost to himself. I'm glad it was you. That caught me off guard. Not because it was too much, but because it was honest in a way he didn't usually let himself be. I didn't have some perfect response ready. So I just told the truth. Yeah, I said softly. Me too. And that was it. No big declaration. No dramatic ending. Just two people lying there, somewhere between what we used to be and whatever this was becoming. The next morning wasn't some clean resolution. It was awkward in small ways. Quiet in others. Full of half-finished sentences and looks that lasted a second too long. But it wasn't a mistake. We didn't pretend it was. And over the next few weeks, we didn't rush to label anything either. We kept hanging out. Kept going to the gym. Kept being us. Just with something new layered underneath. Something real. Looking back now, it still feels strange how it all started. Not with some big confession. Not with some planned moment. Just a stupid joke. A wrestling match that went a little too far. And somehow, exactly where it needed to.